This is Tommy's Outdoors 110. Our guest today is Mark Boyden. Mark is one of the founders of Coomhola Salmon Trust. I hope I pronounced that correctly. After all those years, I still have a problem pronouncing Irish names. So Coomhola Salmon Trust. And Mark was involved in a whole array of environmental projects, like native salmon stocking projects for the rivers in Irish Southwest. He was involved in efforts to reintroduce salmon to the great river of Rhine. He also participated in a successful captive freshwater pearl mussel breeding research. And out of all these programs, he created a biodiversity community engagement project called StreamScapes. And that was mainly what we talked with Mark. And I must tell you that I really enjoyed that conversation. Mark is a educator, and he's really, a very special person. And the main thing I take away from this conversation is like Mark has a very, in my view, refreshing approach to communication and to education about nature and about rivers and ecosystems and so on. And, some of you might disagree with some of the things that Mark says, but I think that in communication and in education, we need a whole array of different approaches. And I really welcome that there are people like Mark and the projects like StreamScapes who are doing an incredible job in educating and encouraging people, especially young people, to learn more about the environment and about ecology and about everything that surrounds us and, why it is important and how to protect it. So very interesting conversation. And yeah, I'm sure you will enjoy it. But before that, just a reminder to share this podcast with your friends and colleagues and everybody who might be interested. And if you want to support this podcast, the best thing you can do is to leave the rating and write a review, especially if you're listening to Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Leave the rating, write a review, write a comment, like, share, all these things. This is great help for me and for the podcast. And also, you can buy me a coffee. buymeacoffee.com/Tommy's Outdoors. The link is in the description of this show. This is always great help. I need a lot of coffee when I'm sitting and editing those episodes for you. And also that way I can save some money on coffee. And, podcast is free for you, but it's definitely not free for me. So your support is greatly appreciated. And now, ladies and gentlemen, StreamScapes with Mark Boyden. Mark, welcome to Tommy's Outdoors. Good to have you. Good to see you.
Great. Thanks, Tommy. It's nice to be here.
Yes, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to host you. I think we have a common friend. Tom Cross was a guest on our podcast. I think you know him as well.
I know Tom. Yes, of course. Tom's. I go back a long way with Tom. He's one of those brilliant minds in salmon biology that Ireland has produced, traditionally and over the years. And Tom's right up there, and he's been a source of great inspiration to me for I think we're going into 4 decades now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It was a brilliant episode. I don't remember a number off the top of my head. But I enjoyed talking with Tom a lot. It was great. So it's good to know we kind of like a same circle of people who are interested in all those things.
Yeah, I must look for that podcast then. I haven't seen that. I did see the one you've just put up with Aga Grandovic as well. And of course, I'm collaborating with Aga over the last year or so.
And what you guys doing together?
Um, Aga came in on illustration and design for the most recent StreamScapes publication, which is entitled Salmon Sanctuaries. And I can provide a URL for you later about where it can be freely downloaded.
Yeah, on your website. I look it up, and it's brilliant. There's both content and visually, it's fantastic. And we obviously gonna put the link to the website.
Yeah, so Aga came in. We needed some fresh illustrations for this booklet. I mean, like we do a lot of publishing down the years. StreamScapes Publishing. We've been doing booklets since, I suppose, the mid 90s. StreamScapes actually started in 1989 as a community engagement program. And this was a time when really environmental education just wasn't on the radar in Ireland, so it was quite groundbreaking at the time. And so we really had to invent the wheel, though, and we had to come up with how to be the most effective we could be at community engagement. But the Salmon Sanctuaries book is, oh God, I've lost track, but it must be about booklet number 25 we've produced. And Aga came in and just did these beautiful illustrations, as you've seen. And she did the design as well and laid it out, top class. And it's so important to have those kind of communications and visual skills in publishing, because it's like, and then I suppose the first thing of the book is the cover photograph, and it's actually full cover. It goes it covers the front and the back covers, and it's an underwater photograph of Atlantic salmon, a school of wild Atlantic salmon in a river, and it's by the Swiss nature photographer Michel Rago, and it's just absolutely stunning. And so, we still believe in hard copies as well. I mean, we put a lot of things online, or most of it, I suppose, but when we engage with communities, and I think we've worked in 24 counties across Ireland, north and south, we still like to give away hard copy booklets because they go home, they end up on kitchen tables, and if they are attractive, you get lots of other people picking up those booklets and kind of going, oh, what's this about, and flipping through it, and that just helps build capacity for outreach.
And it's also a very powerful psychological tool that you have like a physical object.
Yeah.
Especially like today you can download something and then the file lives on the computer and you maybe download, maybe you open, maybe you not open. Well, physical object, like you said, you someone have it, that's different. There's way more powerful. So I agree.
Yeah. No, it is important, but I suppose that was one of the it's one part of the engagement methodology that we identified as being really important. I mean, as I say, starting off in 1989, there was nothing to base it on really, and so we did realize early on that the more creative you could be with a given engagement, then the more effective it is, the more people sit up and take notice of what you're talking about.
Mark, we need to back up a little bit because you started talking about it and we never said StreamScapes. This is what we're talking about. StreamScapes website, streamscapes.ie. And you already touched on that. So the idea was to engage communities about the issues related to rivers, water streams.
Yes, very much. I mean, you know, in a given valley, in a catchment, everything ends up in the river. And so, you know, the quality of your local river offers a fair reflection of the state of your local environment. Um, and and salmon are kind of this iconic species who just are, you know, just one of those kind of, you know, totemic species. If your salmon are healthy, then it's proof that an entire suite of wide biodiversity is also healthy, um, because they share the same requirement for really high quality waters, and high quality waters affect the wider biodiversity, habitat quality, and everything right through the landscape, and the species potential as well. So it just seems to be, you know, a healthy river is really a distillate of a healthy environment and proof of a healthy environment as
Without
well.
a doubt, without a doubt. And tell me, and what is the relation between the Streamscapes and the I don't know how to pronounce it, Coomhola Salmon Trust? That pronounce that right?
Coomhola Salmon Trust is the, you know, it's the vehicle, it's the company. Um, how can I say it? General Mills makes cornflakes. Coomhola Salmon Trust makes Streamscapes. You know, it's like Coomhola Salmon Trust is the organization, and Streamscapes is the product. Streamscapes is the outreach program, you know, produced by Coomhola Salmon Trust. Um,
So it's really, is it all started with salmon? Is it was the starting idea was around salmon conservation, or the starting idea was about
yeah,
waterways and like?
it is, but salmon again as proof of the wider landscape. I mean, so you know, if you've got healthy salmon, you've got good water quality, and as I say, if you've got good water quality, you've got you've got a decent valley. And let's face it, we all live in valleys. We all live in catchments, and you know, and if you look at the land use, if you look at the demographics, you know, if you look at the rainfall, if you look at the topography and geography, you know, you can really paint such a picture of what's going on and what potential there is. And but I suppose Streamscapes itself, um, you know, I mean, I was involved in environmental activism for a long time now. I mean, really, it's 50 years, over 50 years, and and so I had I had seen uh, I had seen a lot of, you know, interaction with environmental issues, but also between environmental sector and other sectors and one thing and another. And it really, one thing that really struck me down the years was that quite often, you know, strife was kind of endemic to the discussion of environmental issues. And it certainly was endemic to salmon management issues and things like that as well. And so part of what informed Streamscapes from really the, you know, the first day, the first days in the late 80s was we were thinking about the psychology of engagement and what would be the most efficacious way of actually, you know, reaching hearts and minds, you know, having people realize that it's all worth caring about and worth striving for and working for. And so it's to do that. You have to come from a place. You have to kind of come from an honest broker place. And what we identified as being absolutely crucial is, well, awareness is the first step, because if you can open your heart and mind to a new awareness of the miraculous stories of the nature immediately around us. I mean, it's all these excellent wildlife documentaries and everything the last 3-4 decades have been fantastic, but they do the disservice of making some people think that I think this is changing now, but for a while there was this overreach that if people thought of the environment, they'd think of the Amazon, or they'd think of the savannah or something like this, and actually, we're right in the middle of this whole ecological functioning unit all the time, and we are part of that. We're not apart from that. We are absolutely integral with everything around us, in our gardens, and what goes down our kitchen sinks and toilets and everything. In Streamscapes, we think of all these things as we think of toilets and sinks and showers and washing machines as tributaries to our rivers, and it kind of changes the way you think. But we did think that you had to reveal wonder. You had to provide a real tactile field experience. And so, for 32 years now or whatever, we've been working with schools and communities, and the heart of that engagement is actually getting people into rubber boots and into the river, and kind of the heart of that engagement was actually doing kick sampling and doing census of aquatic invertebrates, because through that you can really trace the kind of longer term water quality status in your local river, but also to open up people to just the knowledge about the wonderful life cycles and everything that are going on. You mentioned freshwater pearl mussels earlier, and it's like when people learn that the female releases these microscopic spawn. They're called glycidia, after the Greek for arrow, because they have a little hook, and that they kind of just drift with the flow. And the spawn is only viable if it's actually, in effect, breathed in by a juvenile salmon or trout in Irish waters. And literally, if successful, it will hang on to the gill for 8 or 9 months. And this is how mussels distribute through a river system. But then they drop off, and they're just about visible when they drop off to the naked eye. But still, technically, they're kind of microscopic. You'd want a microscope to really see them well. And so the thing is that, and then they spend another 5 years before they actually emerge from the gravel, and and really start getting on with their life cycle, and then that they live for 130 plus years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And when people hear this, they go, "Oh my God, I want to know more." And then stories like that kind of then very naturally will lead to the issues that are impacting them. And discussion of issues then can lead to knowledge of the best practices. And the best practices in terms of pursuit of livelihood, recreation, and, domestic management, the lot. Everything we do impacts upon the wild nature around us and the wildlife. And so, we have to really cop ourselves on. And there's multiple efforts now going on, throughout Ireland and throughout the EU and other places as well. And so I suppose I'm hopeful, but
Are you engaging mainly with people with kids, with children, or is it like what's a percentage of you're engaging with adults as well?
yeah, I mean it's funny, just in the podcast with Aga, you were mentioning the that whole thing of the importance of educating children, and really from, as I say, from the late 80s, we just considered national schools, primary schools, probably as the chief vector of engaging with the community, and then secondary schools, and then the adult community. Really, it's in that order. But if I had to put figures on it, I'd say that 85% or 80 to 85% of our engagement work has been with primary level schools.
So you're very much in a long game,
Yeah.
planting that seed and hoping that the generations to come, once those people, inevitably will be those who will be in power, then they will have the knowledge and they will have, they will care. They will be
Yes.
amazed by the life cycle of pearl mussel or by salmon or those things. So it's a very much longer. I think this is the biggest thing, right? That we need so much to be done now. I feel like, right, when you see what's going on with rivers and other operations that's going on. We might not touch about it later. It seems like is it from the very beginning was the idea that you're in the long game and you're educating the next generation, or is it part of you, or some stuff that you do that you say, no, we need to take immediate action? And
I think it's a bit of everything, Tommy, but but this is the importance, again, to hark back to this, but it's the importance of generating really indelible experiences. So literally, we've been doing it long enough now that I have people come up to me, in town, in the street in town, and say, "Oh, Mr. Boyden, I remember," and they're in their 40s now, and they'll say, "Oh, I remember when you came to our school, 30 years ago, and that was the best day of school ever," because they got outside and they were splashing each other and they were learning about things, and they were identifying all these different insects and bugs, and they got to throw the bugs at each other and whatever they were doing. And so the thing was, it just stuck out in their minds. It just stayed with them. And if you create that indelible experience, then the lessons that are associated with it have a better chance of staying with you as well. And, it has a better chance of kind of affecting, lifelong behavior. So we've done, down the years, we just came up with the most, the craziest things we could think of. I mean, like, for instance, we were stocking some rivers in West Cork with salmon. Now, we don't recommend stocking, and we never did, but it is a supreme educational exercise because you can involve the community, say, in even catching broodstock, and then invite the community around when say you're actually breeding, fertilizing the eggs and things like that. Call stakeholders around when the eggs are hatching out. But what we did with the schools was we fabricated very small aquaria out of marine ply and glass, and we're doing water circulation in them. And what we would do is put the kind of spawning size rivers gravels of spawning size, and put in 20 salmon eggs. and we'd be timing the rate because they're quite delicate. We wouldn't put them in until literally 2 days before they'd hatch, and then they'd hatch in the classroom. The kids would see this, and then we'd leave them for another day or two, and then we'd bring them back to a more secure place in our hatchery. And then, so they would have had this experience of actually seeing olivins, as they're called, emerge from their egg cases. And this was just, wow, this is amazing. But then, okay, that's March, that's around St. Patrick's Day. But then we'd hold them then till June. They're absorbing the embryonic sac. We might give them a first feeding. And then we'd have festivals, fry festivals, as we called them, because small fry. Because literally all the schools in that given year's engagement program would come together for a festival. And apart from exhibiting, say, the eco art that they had produced as part of their StreamScapes projects, it might be, the life cycle of otter or dipper, the river bird, or life cycle of salmon, or it might be artworks, 3D artworks or things like that. But the culmination of this festival would be that everybody, kind of would queue up, and literally we had hundreds and hundreds of people involved in these things, and government ministers launching it and everything. And they would literally come down to the riverside, be handed a jam jar with a salmon fry in it, and they'd let it go. And, like the whole idea of that is that then, we're trying to cut through the, just all these layers of complications. Environment is too big of a word. It's got 4 syllables or so. But fish is brilliant, just fish. And also the whole thing of personalizing the environment. The environment, as I'm always saying, it's not apart from us. We are part of it, and it's at a very immediate level. It's a local level. It's a regional level. It's a global level. But if you have been given a jam jar with a fish in it, and you've studied it and for a few minutes and then let it go, then suddenly you have this huge, investment in the river. It's your fish, I have a fish in that river. So even if I don't have much to do with my river, when I do think it, or even if I'm, just cycling over a bridge, look down the river, maybe people will think, I wonder how my fish is getting on, and it might spur that, that desire to find out what you can do to improve the chances of your fish thriving and spawning itself, So it's all this creativity all the time, and we're always looking for things like
what
that.
was your biggest success, let's say, in terms of knowing people coming back or ending up in NGOs and governments making decisions? Was there like one thing that stands out for you?
I don't know if we've had any success.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
Well, we've certainly, it's kind of an ongoing story, but I think that I'd like to think, and actually I've been told that we have inspired, a whole big wider engagement effort in terms of environment, in terms of wider kind of aquatic and biodiversity awareness and engagement, and also the methods for engagement. As I say.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. What you're describing, that's fantastic, because I can't imagine any kid going through the experience like that forgetting that anytime. Like they're, like you said, that will stay with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another example, I suppose, is that, I mean, like ideally what we'd like to do, you know, from the first days was concentrate at the catchment level. So even, oh God, it's 10 years ago or more, we did a large project in the River Island, which flows through Skibbereen, County Cork. And so, you know, it's kind of a typical smaller to mid-sized catchment, coastal catchment. It's 500 square K. It's got a population of about 13,000. The biggest town would be Skibbereen, and then there's some other villages, Drimoleague and others, and but all told, there's 22 schools. At the time, it was 19 national schools at primary level, and then 3 secondary schools. The secondary schools have combined now, but at any rate, there was 22 schools, including the offshore islands. And so what we did there, you know, we did this dedicated publication, catchment publication. And then we did a large, I think it was A2 paper size insert map that was inserted into the publication. But it was, I mean, really it was suitable for framing, and lots of people framed it, or even just at least pinned it to a wall or a cork board or something. And what we did was we highlighted the rivers, so that the rivers really jumped out of what was otherwise kind of a typical OSI, Ordnance Survey map. So that the rivers really came out, and that whatever townland you lived in, then you couldn't miss the river that you lived nearest to. And so, but the follow-on from that was that, you know, we were having this catchment festival as culmination. And again, I mean, it was massive marquee. The eco artwork, which was coordinated by Jessica Mason of West Cork Sudbury School, and Stephanie O'Toole and a few others. And so every school had generated just an incredible plethora of interesting art projects, all connected with rivers, or being a coastal catchment with the marine side, or one thing or another. But at any rate, we filled a massive marquee at Skibbereen Rugby Club, who were very kind to us, and by the river. And so, but literally for the day, I got the map printed on a piece of vinyl. It was, let me get the measurements right now. The vinyl was 1,200 mil wide, and it was 1,800 mil high. So, you know, it's quite big. You know, it's as tall as a person. But we printed that on vinyl, and then literally we cut it up into pieces, and we assigned each piece of the map to one of the 22 schools. And then also there was, I can't remember now, but I think there was 6 community and voluntary groups that took part, and 5 corporate groups that also went through the field trip experience and everything to do with the project. And so literally it was something like a total of 35, 36 pieces that we cut the map up into, more or less a jigsaw of the catchment. And the nearest geographical piece went to each participating school and group. And so for the festival, they had to bring their piece of the landscape of the catchment. And it all had to be assembled on a really big board. And it was just to, again, it's another effort to just get that right brain kicking in. We so often education is based just on memory or rote or just kind of functional stuff. And what we really try to do with Streamscapes is really just try to awaken that lovely creativity that's in all of us. And so literally all the pieces came together, and people could just see, oh yes, they were part of this bigger landscape, part of this bigger catchment. I mean, one thing we say at Streamscapes is that what do we say? A family is a community related by blood. A business is a community related by ink, and a catchment is a community related by water.
Huh.
So like that's what we're trying to convey all the time, and just that importance that we humans are not separate from nature. We can be at the heart of it, and we can be at the heart of a thriving nature if we get it right.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. Listen, when you're preparing those engagements, those actions, is there times when you would like to do something, but you can't because there's not enough biodiversity, or the river or the catchment doesn't look like it's supposed to. It's not healthy ecosystem. Does it happen often that the way you're designing those engagements, and maybe on the other hand, like on the flip side, the same question is whether, like, how big part of those engagement is pointing out to everything that's wrong, that's the problems, because there's this balance, right, between are we telling the positive story, and then we running into the risk of convincing everybody that, like, oh, everything is perfect, right? It's salmon and pearl mussel, and they do these fantastic things. And on the flip side, we telling, also delivering bad news, like salmon are in jeopardy. There's a problem with salmon. There's a problem with pearl mussel. This happened. But then there's a risk of us telling a negative stories, and people will tune out and say, like, no, I don't need any more negativity. So how you balance that, and how big of a part of those engagement is pointing out to problems?
It's vital, and it's important, but as I say, there's kind of a process to arrive at the issues. First, as I say, reveal the wonders and look at the potential, and then look at the issues, and how, again, like I said before, how best practice can then help a given habitat possibly achieve a greater potential. But to answer your question about like coming across kind of limited biodiversity, we have now, most of Streamscapes' work has been done in rural areas, and you tend to find greater water quality problems downstream, and particularly it's gradually sewage at least is being addressed and everything. But the thing is that when we do the census of the aquatic invertebrates, part of that, and what I must say is that there's huge advances in citizen science now. There's a very interesting relatively new initiative from UCC, from Dr. Simon Harrison and Brendan McSorley, a grad student of his, have put together CSSI, the Citizen Science Stream Index, but I can return to that in a bit. But what we did down the years was that the EPA came up with a water quality index, again based on aquatic invertebrates, insects, aquatic insects that are found. And it was a Q scale, 1 to 5, 1 being extremely bad water, more or less, very no biological function, and 5 being the highest and of really pristine quality.
Okay, which one was the pristine? 5?
5.
5. Okay, and 1 was the worst ever.
Yeah, so we say Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, Q5. Now, the actual determination of it is very difficult to carry out. You really have to know your stuff. You'd want to be very advanced in zoology and freshwater biology to be able to come up with the definitive answers. However, what we did down the years, we came up with during the 90s, we came up with what we called rudimentary Q system. So literally, we were looking for a handful of different indicative insects that may or may not be present. And we had come up with this rudimentary Q. And it was just kind of, seat of the trousers kind of thing, that just because we wanted to convey these principles to the communities that we were working with. The students could actually come up with a very good approximation of what the water quality is or was in their local rivers, So literally, it was the students. And funny enough, working around, right around the country, we've, the vast majority of the cases, luckily, that we've done with schools and with communities, with farmers, with tidy towns groups, with all kinds of stakeholders, it's been like literally from 4.0 to right up to 5 in some places. Now 5 is rare. 5 is very rare, but the vast majority of the places were kind of 4+, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. Then there was also a small minority that was in the 3s. And so it's the kind of thing where I can remember a couple of times we'd come across like 3.6, 3.7. And, that's very, very moderate water. And, you might get trout in kind of just under 4, but it's unlikely. And so once your salmonids can't live there, you've got water quality problems, and you have to address them, and you have to, big time.
Yeah. And tell me, when it comes to salmon, you guys also talked about things like, salmon farms, for example. Are you even go there, say like, well, don't buy farm salmon because this and that is happening, or are you staying purely, in the river on what people can, experience right there and then, and focusing on this kind of nature?
Yeah. Like with education and with the requirement to be, kind of the honest broker, we're not political. We don't take political sides, or we don't, we don't come out against things, or we don't come out for things. Well, we come out for nature, and, but no, we have no position on that. StreamScapes has no position on that. It's just, it's not our business.
It's surprising, to be honest, because I would thought that this is, but I understand that this is kind of charged topic, and especially when you're working with kids and in school, you try to steer clear from this sort of things.
Yeah, it's funny, that you mentioned it, because
Well, I'm against salmon farms. I'm quite open about it because I think they're terrible, especially what's going on in Scotland. Just it's my podcast, so I can say that.
yeah, I'm aware. Believe me, I'm well aware of
I
the
know,
issues,
I'm sure.
and personally, I reckon there's a lot of questions to be answered, and I don't know actually if they can be answered, but there's a lot of contentious ways to either use the land or the waters, or indeed even to make a living, to make a livelihood. And, if we start going there, it just, it's not our mission to go pointing the finger at anybody. It's our mission to inspire, awareness and as I say, this desire to make things better. And it's not necessarily for us to even prescribe how things can be better. At simple levels, we can. Like I say, just that whole thing about domestic management. It's fairly non-contentious. Because what you do ends up, in one way or another. Even if you've got sewage treatment or septic tank or whatever, if you're not doing things right, you limit the efficacy of whatever sewage treatment you're connected up to, whether it's your own septic tank or whether it's a wider sewage system. And it's only really in the last 5 years that these messages have been pushed better, and it's so that's why our whole take is, give your toilet a name, just like you'd name a river, just and call it, call it the Cooling Le Mans stream or whatever, or something,
It strikes me like your approach is kind of refreshing. To be honest, I never, not that I never heard, but it's not often that you see environmental organization or some sort of an engagement or activism which hinges around, positive things and like getting people excited. There's because inevitably there's a lot of negativity around those subjects. That's where my question was before, how you balance that. But it seems like you have a very clear mission of saying, like, let's get people excited and not depressed about what's going on.
Very much. I mean, everywhere you turn, there's bad news. And I'm not denying that, for a moment. But, you can look at your news feed for the bad news. If you're coming to StreamScapes, you're going to get some joy and some wonder. And I think we all need a good dose of that these days. And so we don't point the finger. I think it's, in earlier days, it was a huge, and still, it still applies, that, a lot of people try to create this barrier between environmental sector and other sectors. You see it between farming and environmentalists, and look, we're all in this together. The value of Ireland's agricultural produce will ultimately be tied to the environmental quality in Ireland. And if Ireland comes through over in the coming years and gets, its landscape management right, cleans up its rivers, reduces the nitrate loads and cleans up a lot of the malpractice, then it'll redound to the benefit of the value of agriculture. produce and one thing another like that. So it's all tied together, and it's a fake battle to try to polarize the situation. And even, I mean, I don't know, we have to be working together. And don't get me wrong, there's room for criticism of all these sectors. And in a democracy, you have the right to have a voice, to have a say about what you think about things. You have the right to be to agitate and to bring attention to things that need to be addressed. And we don't shirk that with Streamscapes. It's just that it's not our first message. Our first message is, how can we achieve sustainable rural communities? And rural communities one of its prime considerations is the human element and the socioeconomic element and the cultural element. We want to see thriving rural Ireland persist, in perpetuity. We want to see farms, we want to see woodlands, we want to see all these things. I think the thing is, what we have to learn, first of all, is vision. We have to start thinking in terms of 100 years or 200 years or more. And we're fully capable of that if we take a deep breath and we really think about what our actions are going to do in terms of land management to our landscapes 100 years down the line. It's not too hard to imagine. If you're over farming a given bit of field, if you have salt buildups, if you have soil erosion, well, then basically you're fecking over your landscape and the value of your land and the value of your soil and the ecology of your soil and the nutrition that you're providing for your consumer as well. But so first of all, let's cultivate vision. Let's think long term. And then let's have our first criteria and our last criteria for all of our land management decisions be ecological. So, how does whatever we want to do here, how does it affect water quality? How does it affect local bird life, migratory bird life? How does it affect fish? How does it affect mammals? How does it affect, and how does it affect local human ecology, as we call it? And look at all these things and balance all of these things. And then let's see, in between the first criteria of ecology and the final criteria of ecology, let's see what we can do. I mean, even when it comes to woodland, there's a whole review of the whole concept of forestry and woodland going on under Minister Pippa Hackett at the moment.
Who, by the way, was also our guest on the podcast.
Okay, yeah. And so, that has to yield some real movement, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Woodlands have the capacity to create jobs. Woodland has the capacity to enable Ireland to be self-sufficient in all timber products and to stop having to import hardwoods from threatened hardwood forests in tropical Africa and Southeast Asia and other places. And so let's put our house in order by all means. Let's look at the real needs that we have as a society and as a wider community. But let's don't look at plantations for their own sake. Let's don't alter the natural attenuation of land so much that it exacerbates floods downstream. And then people are wondering, why are there such greater floods? And particularly in a time now of climate change and what looks to be like more intense rainfall when it does come. You know, we haven't really read our landscape properly and then determined how best we can not only meet our own human needs for nutrition and product and other things with a very, very decent and respectful balance for habitat and species needs. And I think our work is cut out for us. We're just in a different mindset, and I think our mindset can be traced to a huge genetic insecurity, is what I would coin it. I mean, for a couple of million years, whatever we were before this human phase, all through the human phase, we have spent most of that time wondering where our next meal is coming from, what shelter we're going to have tonight, worrying about predators, one thing and another. And this is all natural, but we've cracked all the answers to these problems so efficiently that actually we're into overkill, and we're into overkill in our landscapes. And aren't we great? We can produce, more grain than we need, or whatever, or more trees than we need, or more potatoes than we need. I'm not necessarily saying Ireland now, because Ireland is going down in producing. I mean, we're importing potatoes and grain in a big way now. But what I'm trying to say is that I link a lot of environmental misdeed with what I have compassion for, which is a huge insecurity about nutrition and shelter, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if we can take a deep breath, and if we can look at, if we can really look at 100 years down the road, and if we can mature as a species and realize the gifts we have, which would extend to the cultural and everything, then I think we could maybe try to achieve a degree of relaxation and maybe move on another step and achieve a bit of, not only a more just society, but a more just relationship with the rest of nature.
Yeah, no doubt. And do you think we are on the path that leads us there? Are you in other words, is my way of asking, are you optimistic for the future?
I am. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't, kind of pursue all the things I'm doing to try to help in my own little small way, to try to help advance these causes. And to, I mean, the thing is, you have to, this is the beauty of our society and the beauty of democracy and one thing or another is that we are free to think, and we are free to look around, and we are free to gain in awareness, and we're free to then contribute what we see and what our take is to the bigger mix. Now, I think, where I'd like to see things go, and where in similar ways, lots of other environmental NGOs and others would like to see the direction they'd like to see things go. It's still either in a minority or it's outshouted by much larger vested interests who at times, even recently, we would have seen, that kind of trying to put down the NGO sector, the environmental NGO sector, and try to say that they have no right. But that's a terrible, horrible conclusion to come to. We're all in this together, and we owe it to each other to express our voices and to express our considered opinions. And there's even complaint, that like Irish Environmental Network and the Environmental Pillar should have funding withdrawn. This is the talk of tyrants. This is a democracy. This is a broad church. It's a broad society, and if you want to hear the voices of the unendowed, you have profit-making interests. Fair enough, great. Good luck. But if you have a contingent of society who have either scientific expertise or very deep feelings for the earth and deep opinions, you must endow them, and you must ensure that their voice is in the mix at the table, and that they are free to speak and to contribute what they believe, because they have children too, as much as the oligarchs and as much as the vested interests and others. We have to move on. We have to mature. We have to enter into a mature conversation. And I think even what business would find is that if they were more willing to heed a lot of the insights and perspectives of environmental NGOs, they'd find a much more sustainable future for all of their descendants as well.
Yeah, and less risky as well at the same time. It's really, man. You really, in my head, you're presenting a really fresh perspective, because obviously you also see this, like you called, pitting parties against each other, and that frustrates me to no end. People who on one hand kind of are on like an anti-farming crusade, and then on the other hand, anti-NGOs crusade, because there's always them, and and the part of what I do in this podcast is try to present different views from different people from different sides of the spectrum, and there is always one conclusion, that there is way more common ground than there's a lot of these conflicts are around really details, like small things, because the like someone said it on a podcast, I think, that no one ever said like, I don't want healthy environment. No one ever said like, I don't want rich healthy rivers. No, everybody agrees there's other things, how we work it out to get onto that. So yeah, I see that too.
Yeah, the primary ethos of StreamScapes engagement is respect. We come from a place of respect for all sectors. We know it's not easy out there. It's not easy to make a living if you've got, loans and one thing and another to build up your business or your farm or your woodland or whatever. These are all realities. But I think that if you come from a place of respect, you have a much greater capacity to communicate. Where you have polarization, you have entrenchment. And where you have entrenchment, you have defensiveness. And once you have defensiveness and entrenchment, then you lose all capacity to change and to progress and to advance,
because your horizon closes, and then you only see that one thing that you entrenched on, and you focus on that, and then you don't have this wider vision.
Yeah, very much. Yeah. So that's, I think that's how we've been welcomed into community after community for 32 years, is that we're not coming in to point the finger, as it said. We're coming in to reveal that wonder, and that's right under people's noses, and let the questions arise naturally, because they do.
And do you find it hard? And do you then find it hard? Because I would imagine that to stick with your ethos at some point, you're probably coming to the point where you need to consciously, avoid answering question or not answer that, answer that in a respectful way. In a sense, you don't, there are things you don't want to say, right? Is it hard?
I mean, just off the top of my head, I suppose there's been scenarios where, maybe there was awkwardness or something, but I mean, I try to be frank. I've got opinions myself, and I have farmed and I have built. I've been a builder, I've been a farmer. I've had a very practical life before and since I came to environmental education. And I've got a small woodland. So, I mean, like I've engaged with agriculture, with forestry, with construction, with business. And so I suppose in a way that helps me speak the language too, because I think that's a great help, but and also that could be the seat of my respect too, although I like to think that it's in my nature anyway, that, I've respect and compassion for, anybody I meet,
Human beings.
So, yeah, that's it. I mean, we're only here for a short time. We may as well see where we can get and together.
And not fight each other on every occasion, right? Man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Listen, like a last really like a big item I want to ask you, which is really kind of like a staple of a podcast, from the perspective of engagement with communities and spreading that message about wonders of nature. What role do angler community play? Does it are they're featured in any way in your either work or in your thinking as people who are like engaging with nature and rivers on their own?
The angling community.
The angling community.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, long before environmentalism was a word, there were anglers, and I'm not much of an angler myself. I mean, I haven't been fishing in a long time. I think I took a couple of mackerel summer before last, but I've fished off and on, but I'm not an angler. You wouldn't.
Well, if you fished and you took in mackerel, I file you as an angler.
No, not really. I'm not a real angler. I mean, I have chased certain fish in the course of my life. I followed Arctic char up into northern British Columbia as a young man.
Oh, come on, man! You chase the Arctic char and then you go like, no, I'm not an angler. That's very understated.
I mean, I was 20 years old, and it was a summer fling with Arctic char.
Yeah, it counts in my book.
but angling generally, like they were the original environmentalists in lots of ways. You only have to look at Isaac Walton and go back to the Complete Angler and things like that. I mean, it goes back centuries, and these are men and women who had a profound knowledge of the natural life and processes of rivers, of lakes, of marine habitats as well. But I'm more thinking of, say, classical salmon anglers, and these are people, who just were such incredible observers of the natural life, and what insect was hatching which week of the spring and the summer, and how can we mimic, in our fly tying, something, and that's literally what the word angle means, is you're trying to get an angle on these fish. And they were also the first to notice when things went wrong. So because they were in the river and casting in the river and trying to catch salmon or trout or whatever, wherever they were, whatever happened, they whatever fish they happened to be after, they were the first to notice, where there was pollution or kind of disrupted process of any kind. And so really they were in the vanguard, they were in the vanguard. And, it's a strange kind of anomaly these days, because nutrition, kind of comes from impersonal sources as well. People kind of, they think yogurt comes out of a fridge and in the supermarket, and that apples grow on display stands in supermarkets and things. And it's become this kind of ethical thing about, and I'm not disagreeing with it. I mean, we have to be as ethical as we possibly can, as much as our cultivated consciences can assist us to be. But I mean, that whole thing about an angler killing a fish and eating it, there was a time, and this comes out in our Salmon Sanctuaries book, that to eat something it's kind of an act of supreme reverence, and it's saying it's asserting this incredible interdependence with a species. And so one thing we mention in our Salmon Sanctuaries book is that one thing that's kind of shared between all of the old kind of Aboriginal peoples' salmon cultures. And this isn't only in the Atlantic, but in the Pacific as well, because you've got 5, or is it 6, Pacific salmon species as well. And all across the North Pacific, say from the Ainu people, kind of this Aboriginal people of Japan, right up through the native peoples of Kamchatka, over into now what we call Alaska, down British Columbia and the northwest coast of the States, and then over to the Atlantic sphere and the Native Americans of Canada, coastal Canada, Atlantic coastal Canada, and the States, as well as the peoples of Greenland, and then you go over into Finland, the Sami people, the Aboriginals of Scotland, Ireland, UK, Galicia, the Rhine, the Loire. All these people had this, salmon, for instance, inspired this huge body of artwork, of culture, of Lorac tradition, mythology. And, these are people who absolutely depended on eating salmon, on killing salmon, in order for themselves and their families and their communities to live. But it was a give and take. They also realized they couldn't take too many. They also realized that they couldn't pollute their waters, that they couldn't overdo things. It's like this part of this natural relationship, which is so much lost now, with the world around us. And, so yeah, these are interesting themes to me. and that's why we mentioned it in salmon sanctuaries, and that's why Aga, getting back to Aga Grandovic, did this wonderful graphic of the globe, and the center of the globe in this perspective is the North Pole. And so we've got the North Pacific and the North Atlantic and all of the countries, and it's superimposed with icons from the different from those different cultures, including, you know, like 32,000-year-old cave paintings from France and things like that. You know,
I actually noticed that one when I was looking at that document, the map and the icons. It's really good.
great.
Really
Yeah,
good.
Aga did some great stuff there. You know, she's we're coming back to that again. And by the way, I should mention, Tommy, that we've just finished making Salmon Sanctuaries, the film. So there's a 6-minute video, which and the whole idea, and we've worked with North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization, NASCO, and Cork County Council, Kerry County Council, and LawPro, the brilliant community water officers in LawPro, and to make this 6-minute film. So the whole idea is that if a given school, whether they're in Cork or Mayo or Donegal, they can we'll send them however many hard copy books they need. So if there's 30 students in a class, we'll send a box of 30 students, and then they'll get access to the video, and then they'll do a 1-hour Zoom session with the StreamScapes teaching staff. And so that'll all be launched during November now. So November 2021. And details will be coming up on our website, streamscapes.ie.
Yes, and you know, like I mentioned that already. I'm going to put the links to the website in the show notes, and you know, any initiatives in the future, you know, just let me know. We can do this again and talk about more initiatives. Listen, Mark. It's been fantastic conversation, and I really enjoyed you know what I think what you do is really unique and really important, and you're really presenting unusual, at least for me, unusual approach. But it's very refreshing because I guess, at least in my head, when someone says, you know, like an environmental organization engagement, you know, I would almost expect people, you know, a bunch of angry people saying, "Oh, this wrong and this one," and like you say, pointing fingers and kind of, and I have to agree that this kind of takes away from the beauty, albeit the you know that beauty that is still left. And instead of sparking positive emotions, it sparked negative emotions, and then you know, people, when they think about the environment, they think about negative things only, and they more likely to tune out. So I greatly appreciate your approach and your kind of heading what you're trying to do. I think it's great, and it's much needed. So yeah, kudos and great job.
Okay, Tommy, thanks for having me on. It's been great chatting with you, and it's great to get to know you a bit as well, you know. And next time we talk, I'll ask you the questions.
Oh yeah, absolutely, like anytime.
Yeah,
Mark,
yeah.
listen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Okay, all the best, Tommy. Good luck now.